Mira didn't know that the tall man examining ancient texts in the philosophy section was the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. She didn't know he could hear her heartbeat from 3 aisles away, quick and nervous as a sparrow's wings. And she certainly didn't know that he had been searching every library in the kingdom for the scent of old parchment and wildflowers that had haunted his dreams for 5 years. What she did know was that she was late returning the Gregorian manuscripts to their proper shelf, and the head librarian would have her hide if she didn't finish before the evening bell. Mira tucked a strand of honey-coloured hair behind her ear and hefted the leather-bound tome higher in her arms. The Royal Library was nearly empty now, just a few scholars bent over their research in the flickering candlelight. She loved these quiet hours when the world felt manageable, contained between familiar walls of knowledge. Here, in her simple brown wool dress and soft-soled shoes, she could disappear completely, invisible, safe. "You there!" The voice cracked through the silence like a whip. "Girl!" Mira's blood turned to ice. Master Aldrich, the head librarian, stood at the end of the aisle with his thin face twisted in fury. Behind him lurked 2 guards in royal blue, and between them, her stomach dropped, the tall stranger from philosophy, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run. "This is the one!" Master Aldrich declared, pointing a skeletal finger at her. "The thief!" "I'm not—" Mira's voice cracked. "I haven't stolen anything. The Chronicle of Bloodlines, priceless manuscript from the restricted collection." Master Aldrich's voice rose, carrying to every corner of the library. "Gone, and you were the last to access that section." The words hit her like physical blows. Around them, heads turned, scholars whispered. The stranger's gaze never wavered from her face, and something in those storm-coloured eyes made her chest tight. "Please," she whispered. "I was only shelving the returns. I never touched the restricted—" "Liar!" Master Aldrich stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the sour wine on his breath. "Guards, strip her of her position. Search her quarters. We'll recover what she's stolen and see her flogged for theft from the crown." The words landed like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs. Her position, her tiny room above the stables, the only life she'd ever known. "That's enough." The voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. Every person in the library went still. The very air seemed to thicken. The stranger stepped forward, and Mira noticed things her panic had missed before. The way he moved like a predator, all controlled power, the expensive cut of his dark coat, the way the guards straightened to attention the moment he spoke. "Master Aldrich!" His tone was pleasant, conversational, terrifying. "You will not touch her." "My lord, Master Aldrich began, but the words died as the stranger looked at him. Just looked. The head librarian went white and took a stumbling step backward. "You will return to your office. You will speak of this to no one. Is that understood?" Master Aldrich nodded frantically and fled, his robes billowing behind him like black wings. Mira stood frozen, the manuscript heavy in her trembling arms, as the stranger turned those impossible eyes back to her. Up close, she could see they were the colour of storm clouds, silver-grey with flecks of gold. Beautiful, dangerous. "You're safe now," he said softly. The words wrapped around her like warm honey, and something deep in her chest, something that had been cold and tight for so very long, began to uncurl, which was impossible, dangerous. She was nothing, a servant, a girl who shelved books and swept floors and ate scraps from the kitchen, and he was— "Who are you?" she whispered. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, less forbidding. "Someone who's been looking for you for a very long time." That made no sense. No one looked for her. No one even saw her most days. "Come with me," he said, extending one hand. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to run. He was powerful, dangerous, the kind of man who could destroy her with a word. She should curtsy and disappear and hope he forgot she existed. Instead, she found herself staring at his outstretched hand, strong fingers, a few small scars across the knuckles, no rings, steady. She clutched the manuscript tighter. I don't understand. I know. His voice was impossibly gentle. But you felt it too, didn't you, when our eyes met? She had. That strange warmth, like golden thread pulling tight in her chest. The inexplicable urge to step closer instead of running away. Please, he said, just trust me for now. Trust, such a foreign concept. She'd learned young that trust was a luxury girls like her couldn't afford, and yet, when she looked into those storm-grey eyes, she believed him. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, warmth shot up her arm like lightning, spreading through her chest and settling somewhere behind her ribs like a second heartbeat. His fingers tightened around hers, strong and sure, and for the first time in her 22 years, Mira felt like someone had seen her, really seen her. There you are, he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. I've been waiting for you. Impossible. And yet, as he led her from the library into the star-filled night, every step felt like coming home. The days that followed were a strange sort of dream. Mira found herself in the Alpha King's private study, a vast library that made the royal collection look like a village lending shelf. Floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves stretched impossibly high, filled with volumes she'd only heard whispered about in academic circles, ancient histories bound in dragon leather, spellbooks with covers that seemed to shimmer in the firelight, maps of territories that no longer existed. She stood in the centre of it all, still wearing her simple brown dress, feeling like a sparrow who'd wandered into an eagle's nest. You can touch them, you know, he said from behind her. They're meant to be read. She turned to find him watching her with those storm-grey eyes, and her breath caught the way it had every time he looked at her these past 3 days. He'd told her to call him Kieran, just Kieran, but she couldn't quite manage it. He was too much, too powerful, too impossible. I shouldn't, she whispered. These books, they're priceless. So are you. The words hung between them like golden thread, and Mira felt that familiar warmth bloom in her chest. She pressed her hand there, trying to understand what was happening to her, what he was doing to her. I need to tell you something, Kieran said, setting down the tea service he'd brought. Real porcelain, painted with roses. Steam curled from the delicate cups, carrying the scent of bergamot and honey. About who I am, what this is. Mira's stomach clenched. She'd known this moment would come. The moment he remembered she was nothing, nobody, a girl who'd spent her life invisible in the shadows of greater people. I know who you are, she said quietly. Everyone knows. You're the Alpha King. That's not what I meant. He moved closer, and she caught his scent, pine and winter air, something wild and clean that made her wolfless heart race. I mean what you are to me. She shook her head, taking a step back. I'm nobody, a servant. You could have any woman in the kingdom. I don't want any woman in the kingdom. His voice was patient, infinitely gentle. I want my mate. The word hit her like a physical blow. Mate. She'd heard the stories, of course. Every child knew about mates, about the bond that tied alpha wolves to their other half. But those stories were for people like him, not for girls like her. That's impossible, she breathed. Is it? He gestured to the space between them, where the air seemed to shimmer with golden warmth. Can you not feel it, the way your heart calls to mine? She could. Gods help her. She could feel it with every breath, the invisible thread that seemed to tie her to him. But that didn't make it possible. I'm not. She pressed her hands to her chest, where that strange warmth lived now. I can't be your mate. I'm nobody. You're everything. The conviction in his voice nearly brought her to her knees. He said it like it was fact, like the sun rising or water being wet, unshakable truth. Sit with me, he said, settling into one of the leather chairs by the fire. "Please, let me tell you a story." Against every instinct that screamed at her to run, Mira found herself in the chair across from him. He handed her a cup of tea, their fingers brushing, and that lightning warmth shot up her arm again. "I've been searching for 5 years," he said quietly. "Ever since I came of age and my wolf began calling for his mate. The pull led me to libraries, always libraries. I thought perhaps she was a scholar, a learned woman who shared my love of knowledge." Mira stared into her tea, watching the honey swirl in golden spirals. "And instead you found a servant girl who shelves books." "I found you." His voice was soft, certain. "My wolf knew the moment I caught your scent. Old parchment and wildflowers, the smell of wisdom and kindness." She looked up, startled. "How could you possibly know?" He smiled, and it transformed his face again, made him look less like a king and more like a man. "Because I've been alone for so long, I'd almost forgotten what hope felt like, and then I walked into that library, and everything in me went still. Finally, I'd found you." The loneliness in his voice made her chest ache. She'd never thought about what it might cost him being king, being powerful, being alone at the top of the world. "I don't understand any of this," she whispered. "I know." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, those impossible eyes fixed on her face. "It's overwhelming, frightening. You don't have to understand it all at once." "But the manuscript was stolen." His expression darkened. "I've had my people investigating. Someone wanted to frame you, Mira. Someone wanted you discredited, removed from your position." Her blood went cold. "Why would anyone—" "That's what I intend to find out." The authority in his voice reminded her exactly who he was, what power he wielded. "But first, I need you to know that you're safe here, with me." Safe. Such a foreign concept. She'd spent so long invisible, unnoticed, that the idea of being protected felt impossible. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to be whatever you think I am." "You don't have to be anything except yourself." He set down his cup and reached across the space between them, covering her trembling hand with his. "Just yourself, Mira. That's all I've ever wanted." The warmth spread from their joined hands, up her arm, settling in that strange place behind her ribs where it seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Looking into his eyes, she almost believed him, almost believed she could be enough. "Will you stay?" he asked softly. "Just for tonight. Let me keep you safe." Every rational thought told her to refuse, to run back to her small room above the stables and pretend this had never happened. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. "Yes," she whispered, "just for tonight." His smile was brilliant, relieved, and when his thumb brushed across her knuckles, Mira thought she might understand what the poets meant when they wrote about coming home. 3 days became 5, became 7. Mira found herself settling into a rhythm she'd never imagined possible. Mornings in Kieran's study, poring over ancient texts together while he taught her about pack dynamics and territorial law. Afternoons walking through his private gardens, where he listened with genuine interest as she explained the medicinal properties of various herbs she'd learned from the library's botanical collection. Evenings by the fire, reading in companionable silence while the golden thread between them hummed with contentment. She was almost beginning to believe she belonged here. The illusion shattered on the 8th morning when Kieran burst through the study doors, his face grim, a charred piece of parchment in his hands. "We found it," he said without preamble. "The stolen manuscript, what's left of it." Mira's blood went cold. The Chronicle of Bloodlines, the book that had destroyed her life, gotten her accused of theft, labelled a criminal. "Burned?" she whispered. "Mostly." Kieran's jaw was tight with suppressed rage. "But not before I managed to photograph the crucial page." He set a small device on the desk between them, and Mira leaned forward to see the image displayed on its screen. The world tilted sideways. There, in faded but legible script, was a family tree, royal bloodlines stretching back centuries, and there at the bottom a name that made her vision blur. Elena Ravencrest, Princess of the Eastern Territories, beloved daughter, lost to fever at age 22. Below it, in different ink, someone had written, "Survived, bore daughter in secret, child given to servants." And below that, in Kieran's careful handwriting, Mira. No. The word tore from her throat like a physical thing. "No, that's impossible. I'm nobody. I'm just—" "The daughter of Princess Eleanor." Kieran's voice was gentle but implacable. "Legitimate heir to the Eastern throne." Mira stared at the screen until the letters blurred together. Princess. Heir. Throne. The words felt foreign, impossible, like trying on clothes meant for someone else entirely. "I shelve books," she said desperately. "I sweep floors. I eat kitchen scraps and sleep above the stables. I can't be—" "You're everything I said you were." Kieran moved around the desk, kneeling beside her chair so their eyes were level. "Royal blood or not, you were always everything to me." "But this is why." The pieces fell together with sickening clarity. "This is why someone stole the manuscript, why they tried to frame me. They knew." Kieran's expression darkened. "The Eastern Court has been searching for Elena's lost child for 20 years. There are those who would see you dead before they'd acknowledge your claim." Dead. The word hit her like ice water. She'd spent her whole life invisible, safe in her insignificance. Now she was a target. "I have to run," she said, shooting to her feet. "I have to disappear. Go somewhere they'll never find me." "No." Kieran rose with her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "You're not running from this. You're not running from me." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." His grip tightened, not painful but anchoring. "You're terrified. You think if you run far enough, fast enough, you can go back to being invisible. But that was never really living, Mira. That was just surviving." The words cut deep because they were true. She had been surviving, day to day, invisible and safe and so very alone. "They want to kill me," she whispered. "They want to kill the idea of you," he corrected. "The rightful heir who threatens their power, but I won't let that happen." Before she could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the study. Kieran's head snapped up, every line of his body going tense. "Stay behind me," he ordered, moving to the door with that fluid predator's grace. The knock came again, more insistent, and then a voice called out, "My lord, urgent message from the capital." Kieran opened the door to reveal a palace guard, his face pale with exertion and fear. "What is it?" Kieran demanded. "A letter, my lord, for the young lady. It came with the morning post, but the kitchen maid who handled it—" The guard swallowed hard. "She collapsed within minutes. The physician says poison." Kieran went absolutely still, and the air around him seemed to thicken with barely controlled fury. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "Where is the letter now?" "Quarantined, my lord, but the message was clear enough. They know she's here. They know what she is." Mira felt the blood drain from her face. Someone had tried to poison her, would have succeeded if not for pure chance. "Get out," Kieran snarled, and the guard fled. In the silence that followed, Mira sank into her chair, legs too weak to hold her. This was real. The danger, the threat, the fact that someone wanted her dead, badly enough to kill an innocent servant girl. "This is my fault," she whispered. "That girl—" "No." Kieran was beside her in an instant, pulling her against his chest. "This is not your fault. None of this is your fault." But it felt like it was. It felt like everything she touched turned to ash and death. "I should never have stayed," she said against his shirt. "I should have known better than to trust—" "Than to trust me?" His voice was rough with pain. "Mira, look at me." She lifted her head, and the expression in his storm-grey eyes made her breath catch. "I have been searching for you for 5 years," he said fiercely. 5 years of hoping, dreaming, praying to find my other half. And now that I have you, now that I know who you really are, you think I'm going to let anyone take you from me?" "I'm not brave like you," she whispered. "I'm not strong. I don't know how to be a princess or a queen or anything except invisible." "You are the bravest person I know." His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You survived 22 years alone. You carved out a life for yourself with nothing but your own strength and intelligence. You think that isn't courage? It's not the same. It's everything." His forehead touched hers, and that golden warmth flared between them stronger than ever. "My wolf knew what he was doing when he chose you. You're not just my mate, Mira. You're going to be an extraordinary queen." Queen. The word should have terrified her. Instead, looking into his eyes, she almost believed it might be possible. "What do we do now?" she asked. His smile was sharp, dangerous, full of promises that made her pulse race. "Now we fight back," he said, "and I show the world exactly what happens to anyone who threatens what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made something fierce and warm uncurl in her chest. For the first time in her life, someone was willing to fight for her. Someone saw her as worth fighting for. When Kieran lowered his head and kissed her, desperate, claiming full of promise and protection, Mira kissed him back with everything she had, because maybe she couldn't be brave on her own. But with him, she was beginning to think she could be fearless. The grand hall had never held so much tension. Mira stood beside Kieran's throne, wearing a borrowed gown of deep emerald silk that made her feel like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. The Eastern Court had arrived that morning, demanding an audience, and now nobles from both kingdoms filled the vast space. Their whispers echoed off the stone walls like the buzz of angry wasps. She wanted to hide behind the throne, wanted to disappear into the shadows where she'd always belonged. Instead, she forced herself to stand straight, chin raised, even as her hands trembled in the folds of her skirt. "Breathe," Kieran murmured beside her, his voice too low for anyone else to hear. "You belong here." She wasn't sure she believed him, but the certainty in his voice helped steady her racing heart. Lord Aldwyn of the Eastern Court stepped forward, his thin face twisted with disdain. "Your Majesty," he said, the title dripping with false respect. "We come to address this misunderstanding regarding the bloodline claims." "There's no misunderstanding," Kieran replied, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "Princess Mira is the legitimate daughter of Princess Eleanor and rightful heir to the Eastern throne." A ripple of whispers swept the assembled nobles. Mira caught fragments. "Servant girl," "impossible," "bastard blood," each word hitting her like a physical blow. "With respect, Your Majesty," Lord Aldwyn's smile was sharp as a blade. "Anyone can forge documents. This girl has spent her life shelving books. She knows nothing of courtly manners, diplomacy, or leadership. How can she possibly—" "Can she read?" interrupted Lady Cordelia, the Eastern Court's most vicious gossip. "Beyond children's tales, I mean. Can she speak any languages other than the common tongue?" All eyes turned to Mira, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks. They wanted to humiliate her, to prove she was exactly what they claimed, a fraud, a pretender, nobody. "I can read," she said quietly, then stronger. "I speak 6 languages fluently and can translate 12 more. I've studied history, philosophy, mathematics, and natural sciences. I may not know courtly manners, but I know the laws and customs of both kingdoms better than most." Lord Aldwyn's expression soured. "Book learning is hardly the same as noble breeding." "Noble breeding?" Kieran's voice cut through the hall like a sword. "You mean the kind of breeding that taught you to poison servants to reach your targets? The kind that values bloodlines over character?" The Eastern nobles shifted uncomfortably, and Mira noticed several of them wouldn't meet Kieran's eyes. "We know nothing about any poison," Lady Cordelia sniffed, "though one must wonder what sort of activities. this girl has engaged in to earn such protection from your majesty." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Mira felt shame burn through her chest, the old familiar voice whispering that they were right, that she was nothing, that she didn't belong here. "Enough!" Kieran's voice was deadly quiet, but it filled every corner of the hall. Power radiated from him in waves, making the very air shimmer. "You will not speak of my mate with such disrespect." Mate. The word sent shocked murmurs through the crowd. Mira's heart hammered against her ribs. "Your mate?" Lord Aldwyn's voice cracked with disbelief. "This serving girl? Your Majesty surely cannot be serious." "I am entirely serious." Kieran rose from his throne, and the movement was so fluid, so predatory, that several nobles took involuntary steps backward. "Princess Mira is my destined mate, my chosen queen, and anyone who questions her questions me." "But she's nobody," Lady Cordelia protested. "She's spent her life invisible, worthless, a servant." "She has spent her life surviving," Kieran's voice thundered through the hall, "with more grace and dignity than any of you have shown in your pampered existence. She has worked for everything she has, learned everything she knows, built herself from nothing into someone extraordinary. That is not weakness. That is strength beyond anything your bloodlines have ever produced." Mira stared at him, hardly able to breathe. No one had ever defended her before. No one had ever seen worth in her struggles. "Your Majesty," Duke Brennan spoke for the first time, his voice oily with false concern. "Surely you cannot expect the Eastern Court to accept—" "I expect nothing from the Eastern Court," Kieran interrupted. "I am telling you what will be. Princess Mira will claim her birthright. She will rule the Eastern Territories as their rightful queen, and she will do so as my mate and partner." "And if we refuse?" Lord Aldwyn's voice shook with rage. Kieran's smile was sharp as winter. "Then you will discover exactly why I am called the Alpha King." The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. Power rolled off Kieran in waves, not just royal authority, but something deeper, more primal, his wolf, barely contained beneath the surface. "She is everything," he continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "More nobility in her little finger than all of you combined. More courage in her heart than your entire bloodlines possess. She is brilliant, kind, strong, and mine. Anyone who harms her, threatens her, or questions her worth will answer to me personally." The hall fell dead silent. Even the whispers stopped. Kieran turned to Mira then, his storm-grey eyes soft with love and fierce with protection. "You are my mate," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "My queen, my everything. Will you accept me? Will you stand beside me and claim what is rightfully yours?" Looking into his eyes, Mira saw her future laid out like a golden path. Not the invisible, scared girl she'd always been, but someone worthy of love, protection, respect, someone worth fighting for. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes." Kieran's smile was brilliant. He reached for her hand, lifting it to his lips, and when he pressed a kiss to her knuckles, golden warmth exploded through her entire body. Then by right of blood, by right of bond, by right of my word and protection, he declared, "I present to you Queen Mira of the Eastern Territories and Luna of the Northern Pack." The formal words hung in the air like a spell. Several Eastern nobles looked ready to protest, but something in Kieran's expression stopped them cold. "Furthermore," he continued, "any attempt to harm the Queen will be considered an act of war against both kingdoms. Any assassination plots, any poison, any threat of any kind will be met with the full force of the Northern Pack." His canines lengthened slightly as he spoke, just enough to remind everyone exactly what they were dealing with. "The coronation will be held in 3 days," he announced. "You may attend and pledge your fealty, or you may leave our territories and never return. Choose wisely." With that, he offered Mira his arm. She took it, feeling the solid strength of him, the unwavering support. As they walked from the hall together, she heard Lord Aldwyn's voice, low and venomous. "This isn't over?" "Yes," Kieran replied, without turning around, his voice carrying clearly. "It is." And for the first time in her life, Mira believed she was safe, protected, claimed queen. The word no longer felt impossible. Wearing it like a crown, walking beside the man who loved her enough to face down 2 kingdoms for her sake, it felt like destiny. It felt like coming home. The months that followed were a whirlwind of transformation and discovery. Mira's coronation had been magnificent, a ceremony that united 2 kingdoms and marked the beginning of a new era. She'd stood in the cathedral, wearing Elena's recovered crown, Kieran beside her in his ceremonial regalia, and for the first time in her life felt truly seen, truly valued. Now, 6 months later, she was learning what it meant to be both queen and mate. The morning sun streamed through the windows of their private chambers as Mira sat curled in the window seat, correspondence spread around her like fallen leaves, trade agreements from the southern provinces, petitions from border villages, a proposal for establishing new schools in the Eastern Territories. "You're frowning," Kieran observed from the bed where he was reviewing military reports. Even after all this time, waking up beside him felt like a miracle. "The literacy rates in the eastern provinces are abysmal," Mira said, holding up a survey report. 30% of the population can't read their own names. How can they understand their rights, their laws? Kieran's expression softened. "And what does my brilliant queen propose to do about it?" My queen. The possessive warmth in his voice still made her pulse skip. "Libraries," she said, excitement building in her voice, "not just in the capital cities, but in every village. Mobile libraries for the rural areas, and schools, real schools, not just for the nobility, but for everyone. The treasury." "We'll manage," Mira interrupted, then caught herself. 6 months ago she would have apologised for speaking out of turn. Now she simply smiled. "I've run the numbers. If we redirect funds from some of the more extravagant court expenses—" "You want to turn my kingdom into a nation of scholars," Kieran said, but his tone was fond, admiring. "I want to turn our kingdoms into places where birth doesn't determine destiny," she replied, "where a servant girl can become queen not just through fate, but through merit." Kieran set aside his reports and crossed to her, settling behind her on the window seat so she could lean back against his chest. His arms came around her, solid and warm and safe. "Tell me more," he murmured against her ear. So she did. About the travelling teachers she wanted to train, the libraries she wanted to build, the scholarships for promising students regardless of their parents' station. As she spoke, his hands traced gentle patterns on her arms, and she could feel his pride in her through their bond. "The Eastern nobles won't like it," he warned. "The Eastern nobles don't like anything that threatens their precious hierarchy," Mira replied. "But the people will love it, and ultimately we serve the people, not the nobility." "Spoken like a true queen." The approval in his voice made warmth bloom in her chest. 6 months ago she'd been terrified of disappointing him, of proving unworthy of his faith. Now she knew better. They were partners, equals, 2 halves of a whole, working together to build something better. "There's something else," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "Lord Aldwyn requested a private audience." Kieran's expression darkened instantly. "Absolutely not." "Kieran, that man tried to have you killed, Mira. I'm not letting him anywhere near you." "He tried to have me discredited," she corrected gently. "The poison was someone else's idea, and he's requested a formal apology ceremony in front of the entire Eastern Court." Kieran studied her face, his storm grey eyes searching. "You want to do this?" "I need to do this," she said quietly. "Not for him, but for me. 6 months ago, I would have hidden behind you, let you handle all the difficult people and uncomfortable situations. But I'm not that frightened girl anymore." You were never frightened, Kieran said fiercely. You were surviving. There's a difference. Maybe, she smiled, pressing her palm to his chest where she could feel his heartbeat. But now I'm living, and that means facing the people who tried to break me and showing them they failed. Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his hands framing her face, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. You know I'll be right beside you, he said finally. I know. She leaned into his touch. That's what makes me brave enough to try. His kiss was soft, reverent, full of love and admiration. When they broke apart, golden warmth pulsed between them, stronger than ever. I have something for you, he said, reaching for something on the side table. It arrived this morning. Mira's breath caught as he handed her a leather-bound book. The cover was deep blue leather, soft as silk, with silver lettering that read, The Chronicles of Queen Mira, a study in educational reform and social progress. It's the first comprehensive analysis of your policies, Kieran explained. Written by scholars from the University of Windermere, they're calling you the Scholar Queen. Mira opened the book with trembling hands. The dedication page read, To Queen Mira, who proved that true nobility comes not from blood, but from wisdom, courage, and an unshakable commitment to justice. They're teaching your policies in universities now, Kieran continued, his voice warm with pride, using your education initiatives as a model for other kingdoms. You've started something incredible, love. Mira stared at the book, hardly able to believe it was real. Her ideas, her policies, being studied and replicated across the continent. The invisible servant girl who'd spent years shelving other people's books now had books written about her work. I never imagined, she whispered. I did. Kieran's voice was certain, absolute. From the moment I found you hiding between those shelves, I knew you would change the world. She looked up at him then, this man who had seen her worth before she'd seen it herself, who had fought kingdoms for her right to exist in the light instead of the shadows. I love you, she said, the words carrying all the weight of wonder and gratitude and bone-deep contentment that filled her heart. I love our life. I love what we're building together. And I love you, he replied, pulling her closer. My brilliant, beautiful, impossible queen, my everything. Outside their window, the kingdom stretched away in all directions. Villages where new schools were rising, towns where libraries opened their doors to everyone. Places where children who looked like she had once looked could dream of something more than invisibility. This was what happiness felt like, Mira realised. Not just the golden warmth of their bond, though that pulsed steady and sure between them. Not just the luxury of safety and love, though those were precious beyond measure. It was the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do with the person who loved every part of her, the scared girl she'd been and the confident queen she'd become. It was the certainty that some stories really did have perfect endings, and theirs was just beginning. 1 year later, Mira stood in the heart of the new Royal Library, sunlight streaming through tall windows to illuminate the rows of gleaming shelves. The scent of fresh parchment and leather bindings filled the air, mixed with the soft murmur of voices, as scholars and students from every walk of life explored the collection she had built. She wore a gown of deep sapphire blue today, simple in design but rich in fabric, with Elena's crown resting lightly on her honey-coloured hair. A year ago, such finery would have felt like a costume. Now it felt like home. Your Majesty? A young girl approached hesitantly, clutching a worn book to her chest. She couldn't have been more than 12, dressed in the simple wool of a farmer's daughter. Is it true that anyone can read here, even me? Mira's heart clenched with familiar warmth. Especially you, she said gently, kneeling to the girl's level. What's your name? Sarah, Your Majesty. I'm learning my letters, but... She gestured helplessly at the vast collection around them. But there are so many books it feels overwhelming. Mira finished with understanding. I know exactly how that feels. Would you like me to help you find something perfect for where you are right now?" Sarah's eyes went wide with wonder. "You would do that, but you're the Queen." "I'm also someone who loves books more than almost anything," Mira replied with a smile. "Come, let's find you something wonderful." As they walked toward the children's section together, Mira caught sight of a familiar figure leaning against the poetry shelves, watching her with storm-grey eyes full of love and admiration. Kieran. Even after all this time, the sight of him still made her pulse skip. He wore simple clothes today, just dark trousers and a white shirt open at the collar, but he carried himself with that fluid grace that marked him as something more than human. Something powerful and wild and utterly devoted to her. "Found you," he said softly, as she helped Sarah select a book of fairy tales, the same words he'd spoken that first night when he'd moved aside that leather tome and discovered her hiding in the stacks. "I wasn't hiding," Mira replied, but her smile was radiant as she approached him. "No," he agreed, pulling her into his arms. "You never hide any more." It was true. The frightened girl who had spent years invisible in the shadows was gone, replaced by a woman who stood confidently in the light, who spoke her mind in council meetings and walked through her kingdoms with her head held high. "I have something for you," Kieran said, producing a package wrapped in brown paper from behind his back. Mira accepted it with curiosity, carefully unwrapping the paper to reveal a book. But not just any book. This was the original chronicle of bloodlines, painstakingly restored and rebound in midnight blue leather. On the cover, embossed in gold, were the words, "Queen Mira Blackthorn, daughter, scholar, ruler, beloved." "The original pages were too damaged," Kieran explained softly, "so I had the entire thing recreated, every bloodline, every family tree, every record of noble birth stretching back 5 centuries. But yours is the only one that matters to me." Mira opened the book with trembling hands. There, on the final page, was her family tree in beautiful calligraphy. Princess Elena's name, followed by Mira's, and below that, space for the children they hoped to have someday. "This is where it all began," Kieran continued, gesturing to the shelves around them. "You, hiding between these books, me, searching for something I didn't even know I'd lost." "And now?" Mira asked, though she already knew the answer. "Now I've found everything." His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "My mate, my queen, my heart, my home." The golden warmth that had connected them from that very first moment pulsed between them, stronger than ever. Not just the supernatural bond of destined mates, but something deeper, the profound love built through shared dreams, common struggles, and the daily choice to choose each other again and again. "I love you," Mira whispered, the words carrying all the wonder of a woman who had never expected to be loved, never believed herself worthy of such devotion. "And I love you," Kieran replied, "forever and always." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and around them the library hummed with quiet activity. Students reading, scholars researching, children discovering new worlds between the covers of books. The dream she had built made manifest. When they broke apart, Mira rested her forehead against his, breathing in his scent of pine and winter air, letting the contentment wash over her like warm honey. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran asked softly. "The future," she replied. "Our children running through these halls, teaching them that knowledge is the greatest treasure, that kindness is true nobility, watching them grow up knowing they are loved and valued and enough, exactly as they are." "They'll be brilliant," Kieran said with certainty, "and brave and stubborn, just like their mother." Mira laughed, the sound bright and free, "and protective, like their father, and probably completely impossible." "Perfect," Kieran agreed. "Absolutely perfect." As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold, Mira thought about the girl she used to be. Invisible, frightened, believing herself worthless. That girl could never have imagined this life, this love, this sense of belonging so complete it felt like coming home to herself. "Found you," she whispered against Kieran's lips, echoing his words back to him. "Forever and always," he replied, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted of happily ever after. Where are you listening from tonight? I love hearing your thoughts in the comments below. If you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free and helps more people find these stories. Thank you for sharing this journey with Mira and Kieran, and I hope their love story has brought a little magic to your day.